salía, vido en el cielo y en la estrellería, y ídolo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
La mujer de Terra ordenada, día en día ella preguntaba, ¿qué tiene la cara tan demonada? Ella ya sabía el bien que tenía.
Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Los 9 meses pariquería, iba caminando por campos en viñas, y a su marido no le descubría, topó una mara y parería. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. ילדי הטוב והרע, אל תירא ואל תפחד. My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. I pray we'll meet again if he will deliver us. Deliver us from the snares of sin, broken road to stand. Deliver us. There's a light in promised stars. Deliver us out of bondage. Deliver us to the Lord. Hush now, my baby, be still now, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby. So I'll be with you when you dream. River, oh river, flow gently for me. Such precious cargo you bear. Do you know somewhere he can live free? River, deliver him there. just for you. Grow, baby brother, come back someday. Come and deliver us too.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך.
Shalom. Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and welcome to today's Torah study. We're going to be covering a number of very interesting topics today. We'll continue learning the book of Malachi, the last book in the Tanakh. We're kind of halfway through that book, and we'll of course continue and hopefully finish this week speaking about Leviticus chapter 23, which we've been on for a long time, as a matter of fact. And we'll also talk about the issue of Rosh Hodesh, of the new moon, and what this phrase means actually in the Tanakh. So welcome. So let's see, what can I say? I did a video, about 2 months ago or something, maybe 2.5 months ago, when I was back in New York. And the name of the video was that the Jews have 10 years left in the United States of America. And I think that this seems to be coming more and more prophetic. That's too arrogant a word. I don't like that word because I don't pretend to be a prophet and never have claimed that I'm a prophet. But it's becoming, so we'll put it in quotes, prophetic. It seems that a lot of people are giving me word now. I'm back in Israel, but a lot of people are giving me word that a lot of weird stuff is going on in the United States. So I don't know what's true. I still have to look it up, and what is just rumor. But apparently now, I've heard this now from a number of people, so somebody can confirm it or deny it. Apparently, since Zohran Mamdani has gotten inaugurated as mayor of New York City, it's now become common across New York City to hear the Islamic call for prayer, which I've heard when I've been in Islamic countries. I've been in a number of Islamic countries: Tunisia, Morocco. Spent close to a year of my life in Morocco, believe it or not. Tunisia, Turkey, and even the Muslim-populated parts of Israel. And it's known that it's heard in Michigan and Dearborn, Michigan, where there's a particularly high concentration of Muslims. So I don't know if it's true that this is now happening in New York City. I've yet to confirm it. I just heard it in Beit Knesset, in the synagogue over Shabbat, and I'd heard it from one or two other people. But apparently, this is what is going on there. And I do know, I could speak from anecdotal evidence. That when I was back in the United States, I used to go to this bakery that I love. It's probably my favorite bakery in the world. Anyone who knows me, especially back in the United States, knows how much I love Martha's Bakery in Bayside, Queens, in New York. I used to be there almost every day. I'd sit, I would write, I would get work done. And anywho, so I remember, so I started going there when I first came back to the United States from Israel in 2006. I started going there about then, and I never would see a lot of Muslims in there. And not that I hate Muslims. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't hate Muslims, so that's not the point. I have a lot of Muslim friends. As I said, I spent close to a year of my life in Morocco, and I have a lot of Moroccan Muslim friends. But that's not the point. The point is that when I came back this time, every single time I was at this bakery, I noticed that there were Muslims there in traditional Muslim garb. The women would either be wearing hijabs, or the men would have the long robes, either Pakistani style or Middle Eastern style. And I would say almost every time I was in there, especially during the crowded times when it was like, let's say in the evening, like on a Saturday night or something like that, I would notice this. And that was something I'd never, ever noticed before. So what does that imply to me? That implies to me that A, the Muslim population in New York is increasing, and B, the Muslim population that exists there is getting much more open and vocal about openly showing and expressing their Muslimness, if you want to call it that, right? So the important thing about this is that many Muslims, especially in New York, are anti-Semitic. They hate Israel. They hate Jews, not all, but many are. And of course, the election of this Zohran Mamdani and the inauguration of this Zohran Mamdani has, in a sense, unleashed them, or has allowed them to express, or has given them the stamp of approval to express their Muslimness. And this happened, by the way, even before Mamdani got in, that I saw all of this, because I already left New York by the time Mamdani was actually inaugurated. I was there after he was elected, but before he was inaugurated. But the point is that the Muslim population is becoming larger and more vocal. And of course, we know that a huge percentage of them, probably 99% of them, are anti-Israel and are anti-Semitic. There are some that are not, but almost all of them are. And so this was a sign, a visual sign to me, that there's a fundamental change going on in at least the big cities, or at least in New York City in the United States. And by extension, I would imagine many of the other large cities of the United States. You combine this with the fact that the social contract in the United States of America has essentially been broken. So in the time I was kind of caught in the middle, I'm Generation X. Okay, so by the time I was a teenager, the United States was still kind of intact, but kind of on its way to falling apart. But let's say the previous generation, right, there was a certain social contract. You go to high school, you get a good job. You go to high school, you get good grades. Then you either take the, let's say, the professional path of, I don't know, whatever it may be, plumber, electrician, owner of a restaurant, car dealership salesman, whatever it might be, or you go to college. Let's say you take the college route, which is more common among the Jews, of course. You go to college, you get your 4-year degree, you get a good job, you stay at the same place for 30, 40 years, you get your salary, one salary, and I'm not talking about my generation, it was already falling apart by the time my generation entered the workforce, but the previous generation, the baby boomers, you get your job at a single company, I don't know, let's say a Wall Street bank or something like that. One salary can pay for a house, 2 cars, 3 kids, a 4-week vacation in the summer, retirement by the age of 65 at the latest, and a full pension, right? So that social contract began to be broken down step by step, or stage by stage, or piece by piece, already after the baby boomer generation. Already by the time my generation came around, that social contract was already being broken. And without lingering on it, it got worse each generation, to the point right now where those people back in the United States, the up and coming, those who are entering the workforce, whether it's, I guess, Generation Z at this point, maybe soon Generation Alpha, then they are entering a situation where that social contract has already been completely broken. And what they have to rely on instead is gig work, hustling, side hustles, entrepreneurship, whatever. There's plenty of YouTube channels out there, a couple of very good ones that I listen to that can explain the whole situation. But the point is, there is not a lot of economic opportunity or steady economic opportunity for people of Generation Z and even before the millennials and Generation Alpha in the United States. And combine that with all kinds of other signs of societal breakdown, spiritual breakdown, emotional/mental health breakdown, and so on and so forth. I won't linger on it because I'm not going to do a whole video about it. But the bottom line is that Americans are unhappy, miserable, and desperate, far more than they ever were in the past. And they have focused on the Jews as the cause of this problem. I won't get into whether that's right or wrong. Let's just put it this way. If it were completely false, if it were a complete lie, then I don't think it would get a lot of traction. So let's just say there's some, maybe even a lot of truth in it. But whatever the case, whether it's true or false is irrelevant. The younger generation that's up and coming is very lost, very unhappy, very angry, and has focused a lot of that anger on the Jews. So I say, of a person who I speak to a lot, says subtract 100 years. Not that we do numerology in the Torah, but if you subtract 100 years, you go back to 1926, and it's uncanny how similar the situation was in Weimar, Germany, in about 100 years ago, in 1926. The economy was beginning to fall apart, or maybe already was falling apart. I don't know. I'd have to go over my Weimar history again. But the Deutsche Mark was becoming less and less, or was losing its worth. The famous pictures of people going to the grocery store with barrelfuls of Deutschmarks. People, the societal and the social and the moral decay was quite advanced. It was a very liberal, kind of open society, and Germans did not see any future for themselves. They didn't see any stability there, and they once again started focusing on the impact of the Jews in their country and around Europe as the cause of these problems. And we know where that led, right? So if we subtract 100 years, 2026, minus 119.26, we see uncanny similarities to the way it was in Weimar Germany compared to the way it is in the United States right now. So if we extrapolate forward, then this quote-unquote prophecy of 10 years left for the Jews in the United States is certainly not out of the question, right? By the time 1936 rolled around, Adolf Hitler was already in power. The Nuremberg laws, if, again, I have to go look up the exact dates, but I think by that time the Nuremberg laws had already been passed. Kristallnacht was right around the corner, and so on. So all I would say is, sadly, probably what's going to happen in the United States of America. I mean, our stay as Jews in the United States of America is coming to an end. One way or another, there's no doubt about it, no ifs, ands, or buts. It is coming to an end. The Goyim are sick and tired of us. We've made a stink in their noses, to quote what the Israelites said to Moses when he first came to Pharaoh. And we've become a stink in their noses. They, right or wrong, and I won't get into whether they're right or wrong, are blaming the incredibly difficult situation or the breakdown in society that they're experiencing right now on us. And they're strongly giving us signals that they want us the heck out of there. They want us the hell out. Get out. That's what they're telling us. And the current wave, for the most part, as I've mentioned before, that's up and coming, both on the right and on the left, but we'll focus on the right, like Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and even Candace Owens. So I think she's gone off the deep end. And even the election of Mamdani, but they are not, well, maybe with the exception of let's leave Mamdani out of it, but they're not. Let's take like Nick Fuentes as the classic case. As I was saying to somebody today in the synagogue, these are not the outright Nazis. They don't hate Jews, okay? They're kind of more like the harbingers. They're kind of like the canary in the coal mine. They're basically telling us, listen, you guys have to pack up and get out. You're wrecking our country. You've wrecked our country. And we're telling you nicely that the time has come for you to pack up your shit and get out of our country. That's what they're telling us, okay? They don't have in their minds, I don't think, any of those three that I mentioned. Well, Candace Owens, let's leave out of it, but certainly not Tucker Carlson, and even Nick Fuentes, who's up and coming on the right. They don't have in their mind to actually set up concentration camps and kill all the Jews or something along those lines. But they are telling the Jews very strongly, pack up your crap and get out. Go back to Israel. Go wherever you have to go, but you have to get out of our country. If we don't listen to them, just as the Jews in Europe in the 1920s and early to mid 1930s, if they didn't listen to all of the signs that were being broadcast, that were being told to them there, then the next step is, okay, you won't get out, then we're going to have to get you out. And that's exactly what occurred in Nazi Germany. The Nazis originally did not even want to kill all of the Jews. That's why it was called the final solution. They just wanted us out. There were even talks between the Nazis and the Zionist leaders to get Jews to emigrate to Israel. It was the Jews who didn't want to leave for the most part. So likewise in the United States of America, if we don't listen to these harbingers that are clearly expressing the feelings of the up and coming generations, maybe even some of the older generations, then the next wave is going to be like, okay, we told you that you have to pack up your crap and get out. You're not doing it. So now we're going to have to get you out. Okay. It's kind of like if you come home to your house after a couple of weeks vacation and you see a squatter living in your house, right? You say, listen, get out, pack up your crap, get out of my house. Okay. If the squatter gets out, then that's it. Maybe the situation is over. Okay. If the squatter doesn't get out, the next step is to call the police. And the police come and tell the squatter to get out. Then if the squatter gets out, it's all over at that point. It's now escalated. It's all over. If the squatter doesn't get out, then the police start using force. And then the next step is if the squatter resists, then the police can use deadly force and end up either injuring or even killing the squatter. And they will not be charged with any crime, and it will be according to the procedures of the police to do so. Okay? So we're in stage 1 at this point of those 4 stages. Okay, we're in stage 1. The Goyim are telling us they've come, they've woken up and come home to their house and seen us there for too long, and they're like, listen, guys, our country's not doing well right now. We have a lot of our own problems. You are a disturbing element in our country. You have to get out. Okay, that's it. We've hosted you for whatever 100 years, give or take, for the most part. We're done. We can't do this anymore. We have our own problems. We've got to clean up our own house. Pack up your stuff. Get out. Okay. If we don't, which most of us won't, of course, because we've come to this false belief that we're Americans more than we're Jews, or shall I say back there they have. I certainly don't have that false belief, and many of the Jews who live in Israel don't have that false belief, although some still do, I think. But but most Jews living in America, do I speak Hebrew? Yes, I speak fluent Hebrew. Most Jews living in America still have that false belief, so they're going to say, "What do you mean, get out? This is our country as much as it is yours. We fought in world, just like the German Jews said, right? We fought in World War I. They would show their medals, they would show their medallions from World War I. We fought in World War II. We fought in Vietnam. We built this country. Look at all the good things we did, and so on." And then stage 2 is going to come, which is basically, laws will be passed, which are going to reduce. It's going to be just a repeat of what happened in Germany. And eventually, if we don't get out, it's going to go to stages 3 and stages 4. And I think all of that is going to happen within the next 10 years, or let's put it this way, by the time 10 years from now, 2036 rolls around, we're going to be in a very advanced stage. Whether we'll definitely be past stage 1 by that point. Whether we're in stage 2 or 3 or 4, I think we'll at least be in stage 3 by that point, which is actively, looking for places, basically passing laws to get us out of the country. And if not, then it might even go, for those who resist at that point, then it might even go to stage 4. At any rate, that is the story. I could linger on this for another hour if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. The point I just wanted to make is that, it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. God, Yahweh, always sends us messages that we need to hear. Whether we listen to them or we don't listen to them is our choice, but they're there for us to listen to. And the wise man listens to those messages, just as the wise man, the wise woman, listens to his own gut feeling, his own intuition. So the messages are there. The Goyim are clearly in the United States telling us, that's it, we've had enough. It's been a nice journey, but it's now time to get out. But the stubborn nation that we are, we're probably, for the most part, not going to listen, just as it was the case in Europe. Only a small percentage ended up leaving Germany and leaving the rest of Europe. Many of them, once it was almost too late, many of them got out, by the skin of their teeth at the last moment or in miraculous ways. And some, of course, many never got out. So subtract 100 years, or let's say add 100 years to 1926, we get 2026. And if you start watching the parallels that are happening between Germany/Europe in 1926 and the parallels that are happening in the United States, this is the last big place where we exist. This is our last big population center, right? There is no other population center, huge population center for Jews outside of Israel, aside from the United States, right? What's next after that? Great Britain, I don't even know how many Jews are there. Not many. France, not too many, and many are leaving. Great Britain already, they're starting to leave Australia. There was a terrorist attack against Jews in Bondi Beach a month or 2 ago, 2 months ago or so, Hanukkah time, right? So about a month ago, right? So there's no major population center in the world left for the Jews outside of Israel, except for the United States of America. And that is now coming to an end. That's now coming to a close. So that's all I have to say. If you can convince your friends, relatives, neighbors, Jewish neighbors to get out and make Aliyah, then do so. But a lot of times I found you just, spitting in the wind, you're just speaking to a wall. But of course, we all have to do what we can. A lot of my family I gave up a long time ago trying to convince them that they have to get out. So I guess they're going to have to find out the hard way. Maybe they'll realize it by the time stage 2 rolls around and not by the time stage 3 and stage 4 rolls around, right? So stage 1 is the Goyim are basically telling us, listen, guys, time to go, time to get out. Enough is enough. We have our own problems. It's been a nice stay, but, you've overstayed your welcome as guests in our house, and it's time to go. Stage 2 is more like laws are going to be passed, like the Nuremberg laws, where it's now going to be, our rights are going to be reduced. There'll be special laws made for Jews to reduce the rights of Jews, just as there were in Germany back in, again, I don't remember the exact date of the Nuremberg laws, which was 36, 37, I think something like that, maybe earlier. And the next stage after that is going to be we're actively kicked out of the country. So, for instance, in back in Germany, there was the Madagascar plan to transfer the Jews to Madagascar. There were talks with Zionists, with the leaders of the Zionist enterprise to get Jews to emigrate to Israel, etc. Again, very few left at that point. And then stage 4 was in Germany the final solution, and it will get to that in the United States for those who don't listen to stages 1 through 3, it will get to that. So those are my thoughts for the day. And we can now get into doing some Torah study. Any comments or any ideas or thoughts about this, you're more than welcome to put them in the comments. And let's get into the Torah study. I see some questions here on the comments. So the first one, the question is, what does one do on Shavuot? I assume that's a reference to the idea that if we don't celebrate Shavuot as Chag Matan Torah, the holiday of the giving of the Torah, then what is there to do on Shavuot? I'm assuming, because I've had this question many, many times over the years. And the answer is, well, according to the Torah, there is nothing that we're supposed to do on Shavuot except celebrate it as a Mikra Kodesh, as a holiday. We're supposed to refrain from Melacha, or Melechet Avodah. We're supposed to refrain from doing work. And we're supposed to bring sacrifices, including, of course, the 2 loaves of bread made out of the first fruits of the wheat harvest. That's what we're supposed to do. So we can't do any of the stuff related to sacrifices. So what I would suggest, in the way I celebrate Sukkoth and the way that my community celebrates Sukkoth, is we treat it like a Shabbaton. In other words, it's a day off. We don't do any work. Excuse me. Let's get some water. Sorry. Let me just, excuse me for 1 second. Okay, so we treat it as a Shabbaton, as a Shabbat-like holiday where we don't do work on that day. We celebrate it as a festival. Of course, we're supposed to ultimately go to Yerushalayim on that day and be Yerushalayim, Jerusalem on that day, and be at the temple to be part of the giving of the presenting of the 2 loaves of wheat bread. But that's not being done in this day and age because we don't have a temple and we're not in control of the Temple Mount. So what I do and what our community does is we learn about Shavuot and celebrate it. And I like to focus also on learning about the agricultural cycle in Israel, on ancient agricultural practices, do talks or discussions about that, and try to recreate in our minds what Shavuot would have looked like and would have been like in ancient times when we could bring the sacrifice or the offering of the 2 loaves of wheat bread. But to turn it into a holiday which is not spoken about in the Torah is not the way to go. To make up a new holiday or to make a completely new meaning for the holiday, which is Chag Matan Torah, the day of the giving of the Torah, is adding to the Torah. it's making up something that is not part of that holiday at all. And if we had time, I can go into the reasons that I think are very clear in the Torah as to why. So the rabbis based this idea of Chag Matan Torah, or Shavuot being Chag Matan Torah, on the idea that it would have fallen, that the giving of the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai would have fallen on the same day as Shavuot. Well, there are a lot of problems about this, and if we get into it, it'll be quite a long discussion. But the first thing to understand is that Shavuot did not fall out on the same day in ancient times every single year. There was no such thing as a fixed calendar. There was a calendar by observation of the new moon. And in fact, if we believe the Karaite opinion regarding the Omer offering did not occur on a fixed day. The rabbis fix it, of course, always on the Lemachrat Shabbat, meaning on what's called the 16th of Nisan. They fix the bringing of the Omer offering. And so Shavuot is always a fixed day because they go by the fixed calendar of Hillel II. Right? So Shavuot always falls on the third day of Sivan or something like that. It doesn't matter. The point is that there was not a fixed calendar in ancient Israel. So Shavuot never would have fallen on the same day. Okay? Now, if you go through if we do this, we're not going to get to other things. But I'll just say one thing very quickly. Maybe I'll even share the screen. So if you go to Exodus chapter 18, let me share the screen. Just give me 1 second here and I'll share the screen. Let's see here. Oops, here. Remove, present, stop screen, share screen, window. Okay, so if we look in Exodus, let's start back in, I'll just do it in English for now, just to save time. If we need to go over to Hebrew, we'll go over to it. And let me just find this. Just give me 1 second here. So, okay, so first of all, let's get the rabbinical date for Shavuot. Okay? Date. Hebrew date for Shavuot. The 6th of Sivan. Okay, so the 6th, the 6th day of the third month. Okay, so that's when that's according to the fixed calendar, the fixed quote unquote the Hebrew calendar of Hillel II. Shavuot will always fall on the 6th day of the third month, which is going to be exactly, exactly 49 days after the 16th day of Mimacharat Shabbat. Let me just figure this out in my head. Right, Shabbatot. Start seeing that on that. Right, so it's going to be exactly 49 days after the 16th of Nisan. Again, I'm using the rabbinical terms. Okay? At any rate, it's always going to fall out on the 6th day of the third month. So where did they get the idea? And actually, let me put that on the screen so we can remember it. Okay? So I'll put this in the comments. Okay? According to the rabbis. Oops. according to the rabbis, Shabbat always falls on the 6th day of the 3rd Hebrew month, known as Sivan. Okay, so let's remember that first, so we can have a reference point. So now the question is, was the Torah, were the 10 Commandments given on the 6th day of the 3rd Hebrew month? So where do the rabbis even get this idea from? And for that, we have to go to just one second here. Give me one second here. So we see in Exodus 19 that it was on the 1st day of the 3rd month that they came to the desert of Sinai. Okay. And then what we have is a series of events. Okay. Moses goes up to God. Again, I'm just going to use the English here just to make it go more quickly. So Moses goes up to God. So on the 1st day of the 3rd month, the 1st day, quote unquote, Sivan, we arrive at the desert of Sinai. We arrive at Mount Sinai. It says right here, Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. That's the Hara Elohim, the mountain of God. Then Moses goes up to God. And I'll just skip ahead here. And then he comes back down. So Moses basically goes up to God. God gives him this talk right here. Okay, you'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Moses goes back down and summons the elders of the people and relates to the elders the words that God said to him. And they say, Na'aseh v'nishma, or they say, we'll do everything the Lord has said. And then Moses goes back up to Yahweh. And then God speaks to Moses again, saying that he's going to come down and essentially give the 10 Commandments. Okay? And then Moses goes back down the mountain and tells Israel what God said. So then we have, and just give me one second here. And then God says to Moses that the people should be ready by the 3rd day. Okay? So it would seem from this that this means that if this is the 1st day, they arrive there on the 1st day of the 3rd month. We don't know how long all of this happened in. Okay? There's no reference point in time for all of this stuff. For Moses to go back up and down the mountain, for God to say you're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Then for Moses to go back and forth, he goes back and forth 4 times, right? If I count correctly. So finally, however long this takes, then Moses does go to the people and says that they should consecrate themselves today and tomorrow and be ready on the 3rd day. Okay? So let's just say that this all happened on the 1st day of the 3rd month. Moses got there, which by the way is not logical. Okay? Moses got there, immediately ran up the mountain, ran back down, up and down 4 times or 3 times. And then God said, be ready on the 3rd day. Then that would place the date of the giving of the Torah as the 3rd day of the 3rd month. Okay? So And let me just go ahead here for 1 second. On the morning of the third day. On the third day of the third month. So that's not the sixth day of the third month, first of all. Okay. Now, in order to get a bit more context, we have to go back to chapter 18. Actually, let's even go back to chapter 17. Just 1 second. We'll start in 18, okay? So in 18, we see Jethro comes. Okay, we know this is a famous story of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. He comes with Tzipporah to meet Moses. And where does he come to meet Moses? Let's see. So it says here in verse 5, this is Exodus chapter 18, verse 5. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. Okay? Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, are coming to you with your wife and 2 sons. So where does he come to him? Jethro comes to Moses when they've already reached Mount Sinai. Okay? So why is this not mentioned here? Because in Exodus 19, okay, here it says they came to Mount Sinai. Okay? Because that's not the way the Torah works. The Torah works contextually. Okay? The Torah is telling us here already, or it's giving us now the story of Jethro. Okay? Already at Mount Sinai. But the focus of Mount Sinai is going to be the giving of the 10 Commandments. But we see when the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai, it says so explicitly here that they arrived on the first day of the third month. But this story happens, okay, in front of the mountain, which can only mean the mountain of God in this context. But we see that this entire story of Jethro, even though it comes before Exodus 19, happens where? Let's find it again. It was in verse 5. Right? It happens when the Israelites are already camped near the mountain of God. They were already camped at Mount Sinai. Okay? So we have a whole bunch of things that happen between the first day of the third month, which is when they arrived at Mount Sinai. So Jethro could not have come to them before the first day of the third month, because it says explicitly right here that they came to the desert of Sinai and camped in the desert in front of the mountain. That's on the first day of the third month. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen between the time that they arrive at Mount Sinai on the first day of the third month, which is explicit. We have Moses going up and down the mountain, okay, 3 times. Okay, first coming down with a speech. I've carried you on eagle's wings. You're a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Blah 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 blah. No, I shouldn't say that, right? These are important words. I shouldn't belittle them like that. I was kind of making a joke. At any rate, and then he goes back up. No, then he summons the elders. The elders say, we'll do everything that God has said. And Moses goes back up the mountain. Then God tells Moses, I'm going to come to you soon and give you the 10 Commandments. Then Moses goes back down the mountain. So was it 2 times, 3 times? I think 3 times. Okay. It doesn't matter. He goes up and down the mountain a bunch of times, bringing messages back and forth between God and Israel. And then finally, Moses says, at some point, we don't know when this is, right? This is not anchored in time. This is not anchored in time. Okay? But at some point, he says to them that they should be ready on the third day. Okay? But there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in between. They're coming on the first day of the third month. This is anchored in time. This is a specific day in a specific month. So Moses goes up and down the mountain 3 times. And then the whole story of Jethro occurs after they arrived at Mount Sinai. Now, let's just look at the story of Jethro for a second. Okay? So the next day, whenever that is, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning to evening. So this is certainly the very earliest. If, let's say, Jethro arrived on the first day of the third month, Then the next day is the second day of the third month. The point is we have this whole intervening story of Jethro and Moses occurring after the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai. Okay, so Jethro sees Moses judging the people. And just give me 1 second here. Jethro sees Moses judging the people. And then he gives him his advice. Okay, what you're doing is not good. You, these people who come to you will wear yourselves out. And he tells them over here in Exodus chapter 18, verse 21, select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. You'll make your load lighter because they will share it with you. So Jethro sees Moses judging the people, tells Moses to set up this hierarchy of judges, thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. By the way, this is not a tribunal of judges, as I spoke about, or as I defended this idea in the debate that I had with Rabbi Asher Meza, which you can look on the YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel, and eventually his, I guess, to see that debate. These are individual judges. This is a single judge is a hierarchy of judges. It's a pool of judges, and one judge would be picked for each case. I won't get into that right now. It's getting too far afield. At any rate, so all of these judges had to be chosen from among the people. And the system had to be set up. Okay. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on the way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Okay. So all of this happened when the Israelites were already at Mount Sinai. Okay. So you have Moses running up and down the mountain 3 times. Moses then telling the people to prepare 3 days later. The whole story of Jethro occurring, which also is not anchored in time. So it could have occurred already after the 10 Commandments are given, but I don't think so, because then the story would have actually occurred after the 10 Commandments are given in Exodus chapter 20. So you have a whole bunch of stuff going on between this day. This is the only anchored day that we have, the first day of the third month, and the actual giving of the 10 Commandments, which is in Exodus 20, a day for which is never given. We don't know on which day the 10 Commandments were given. And then we go on to Exodus 21, 22, 23, which are other laws, right? There's no anchor in time for the giving of the 10 Commandments. What we do know is that the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai on the first day of the third month, and a whole bunch of stuff happened. Moses ran up and down the mountain, told the people to be ready on the third day. Third day after what? We don't even know, because we don't know the day on which he ran up and down the mountain. Okay, let's say it's the first. Let's play, or let's assume that he got there. Let's assume that if we look at Exodus chapter 19, that he got there on the first day of the third month, ran up and down the mountain 3 times that same day, and then told the people to be ready on the third day. That would make it the third day of the third month, which would not be the Hebrew date for Shavuot, would not be the 6th day of the third month. And I'm not even taking into account, this is almost all irrelevant, because we're doing this according to the fixed calendar. When you take into account the actual calendar of observation, as it was in ancient times, and the picture gets even more clear, it gets even clearer, but just to simplify things for now, we'll stick with the fixed calendar. Okay, so let's even say Moses ran up and down the mountain 3 times that day, and then told the people to be ready on the third day. That would mean that it's the third day of the third month, not the 6th day of the third month, on which the 10 Commandments would be given. So what the rabbis essentially have to say is they have to, in order to make Chag Matan Torah, the day of the giving of the 10 Commandments, to fall out on the 6th day of the third month, they would have to say that all of this intervening stuff took exactly 3 days. Okay? And they're not even taking into account Jethro, at least not that I could find in the commentaries. They think that Jethro happened afterwards, the story of Jethro. Okay? The point is that there's no evidence in the actual text of the Torah that the giving of the Ten Commandments falls out on the 6th day of the 3rd month whatsoever. There are a lot of variables in here. So then you have to go back and rely on tradition. Okay? So, and that's exactly what the rabbis rely on. They rely on their so-called tradition that this was also the day, that Shavuot was also the day of the giving of the Torah. First of all, it wouldn't make sense that Shavuot would be the day of the giving of the Torah. Well, I guess you could say they didn't celebrate Shavuot yet because that's only when they come into the land. So forget that. I'll even drop that point, okay? But the point is that they can't draw it out of the text. They have to rely on their so-called tradition, which there is none. I can't find any evidence in the Tanakh that Shavuot was ever considered Chag Matan Torah. Can you? If you can, please bring me chapter and verse. I certainly can't. So what did they do? They saw the problem that Shavuot could not be celebrated without a temple, which they themselves caused the destruction of. It was the Pharisees who invited in the Romans, who came in 63 BCE and conquered Israel, took over Israel, and then destroyed the temple 133 years later in 70 CE. So the rabbis realized that they have to give another meaning for Shavuot without a temple, and so they made up this idea that it should now be Chag Matan Torah, because it's not too far away. I mean, who knows? We don't know. We don't have anchors in time for this at all. I think the next anchor in time is, and I'd have to find it, is when they left Mount Sinai. We get a date, which is much later. I think it's 3 months later or something like that, if I remember correctly. So they have to make up this myth. I'll be generous and not call it a lie. I'll call it a myth, and lie and say it's a tradition in order to give the meaning of Chag Matan Torah to Chag Shavuot, and that's exactly what they do. Because maybe it fell around more or less near, and they needed a meaning for Chag Shavuot. Because what do you do on Shavuot if you don't have this meaning of the holidays Chag Matan Torah, right? That was their problem. Okay, you could say, wow, they were really geniuses to come up with this idea. It was close enough. They made it up. They said it was a real thing. They lied a little bit. They fudged a little bit. And now, they were afraid maybe we wouldn't be able to celebrate Shavuot if we didn't have this meaning of Chag Matan Torah. But I don't think that's what's going on there at all, okay? I think that it is possible to celebrate the holiday without giving it this extra added false meaning of Chag Matan Torah, just as I and my community do, just as I and we in the World Alliance of Qara'im do. We still celebrate it as a holiday, and we dedicate it to understanding what Shavuot was like, what it would have been in ancient times, to learning about the agricultural year, the agricultural season in Israel, studying, learning about ancient agriculture, having a nice meal, and so on and so forth. So we don't need to lie to make up stories about the meaning of Chag Shavuot in order for it to have meaning. It has meaning in and of itself, even if we can't keep that meaning, at this point in time. Okay? So I hope that kind of answers the question. Shabbat Shalom. And let me get rid of this. Comments. Hide. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on? It creates a danger when you start giving false meanings to holidays that don't exist in the Torah. It creates a danger because now you create a new religion. You create a new religion, which is exactly what the rabbis did. They created a derivative religion, just as Christianity is a derivative religion of Torah, just as Islam is a derivative religion of Torah. The Quran is, in large part, it's Muhammad's, or whoever wrote it, let's say Muhammad's commentary on the Torah. These are derivative religions of true Torah. Christianity, Islam, and Rabbinical Judaism is a derivative religion of true Torah. It is not Torah. It is not true Torah. It's not the way that the ancient Israelites kept the Torah. in ancient times in many ways. This is just one example. And you could say, so the argument that I hear from rabbinical Jews all the time is, well, this is what kept us. This is what kept us in the galut, in the exile, right? If we didn't have this new understanding of the religion, we would have gotten lost in the exile. So it kept us in the exile. And I always say, yes, it kept us in the exile, right? It caused us to remain in the exile. But let's even give, again, the rabbis the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that this scaffolding of all of these changes, these modifications, what they would call development, that's a bunch of BS, these modifications that they made to the original, laws of the Torah, the original religion of the Israelites. I hate the word religion, but we'll just use it. Let's just say it was all for good reason. It was necessary to keep us as a coherent nation, to give us a coherent religion to follow while we were in the exile. Let's just say that's true. Okay? Well, guess what? We're not in the exile anymore. And if you listen to my opening monologue, you'll see that the one remaining population center of Jews in the entire world, the United States of America, that's coming to an end within the next, I predict, 10 years. So the exile's ending. The exile is coming to an end. So if it's true that rabbinical Judaism represents a kind of scaffolding or a kind of packing up of the ancient religion of the Torah into a portable version, which we could take with us to wherever, to Morocco and India and Spain and Los Angeles and Iran and wherever else we ended up, Australia, Japan, wherever else we ended up, that's fine and dandy. Let's even say that's the case. Now it's time to unpack that suitcase. It's time to throw out all the junk that we don't need anymore. And it's time to get back to the original religion. Again, I hate that word, quote unquote, religion of the Torah. It's time to get back to the original meanings of the Torah. And when we do, I think something amazing is going to happen. I think we will reconnect as a nation, as a people. We will reconnect with Yahweh, with our God. He will reconnect with us through prophecy. And what will happen then will be some amazing things, which I've expressed in other videos. I think that essentially, well, I don't want to get too radical right now. I think essentially that he is going to, he's going to give us, I call it Torah version 2.0. I think some of the laws of the Torah are going to be thrown out permanently, and I'm specifically referring to meat sacrifices, which I don't think have relevance in this day and age. They're a relic of the way that societies in the ancient Near East and beyond worship their deities by bringing animal sacrifices. I don't know if it's relevant anymore. But it's whether he does or doesn't, that'll be up to him. But I believe, this is just my idea. You could find a scriptural basis, but it's my belief and nothing more than my belief, my hunch, my intuition, my feeling that once we reconnect, once we are finally thrown out of our last exile, which is going to be a very painful situation, especially for the Jews in the United States, including many family members that I have there. I'm very much worried for their future, but I can't. I've spent decades trying to get them to come here, and some of them will literally not even mention the word Israel. They'll call it that country. Oh, you're going back to that country. That's how antagonistic they are to the idea of admitting that they are not Americans. At any rate, I think that once this final exile does end, which I think will happen in the next 10 years, that's my prediction, and that will represent there'll be some other big changes in the next 10 years, but that will represent the ingathering, the final major ingathering of the exiles of the people of Israel to the land of Israel. I think at that point, then we will, as a nation, as a people, reconnect with Yahweh through prophecy. And at that point, we'll see what happens. But I think that he will, once he's able to speak to us again directly as a nation, then there are going to be some, I know this sounds radical and maybe even heretical, but I don't think it is if you understand where I'm coming from. And I could bring some interesting verses. I think there will be some updates to the Torah. Of course, there are some laws that are eternal, such as do not murder, do not steal, do not commit adultery. These are eternal laws. Much of the Torah is eternal laws, but specific things that were implemented for specific times. Again, the example I give is the meat sacrifices, which I don't think are an eternal way of us connecting with God, but was the way that ancient Near Eastern nations understood that that's the way they connect with their deity. Then there'll be an updated, I call it Torah version 2.0. I'll show you two very, very interesting verses in the Tanakh, which I've spoken about for years, which point in that direction. And the first one is, just give me 1 second, Isaiah. Let me find it. Just give me 1 second. Second. That's also a good one. Isaiah 43:18. Let's start there. Give me 1 second here. Let's go to Isaiah 43:18. It's not the verse I was looking for, but it works. Let me just get the context here. Right, so this is an interesting verse. Again, I'll just read it in English to save time here. Where is it? 1 second. 43:18. 18, right? Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up, do not perceive it. The idea here is that God, Yahweh, is a living God. He's not static. Okay, it's a real relationship that we have with him, but that's not the verse I'm looking for. I'm looking for a different verse. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to find it. And this is people who don't know this verse. It will be a bit of a shocking verse. No longer. Okay, 1 second. Give me 1 second here. Where is it? Give me 1 second. There it is. I'm sorry. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Let's look at that. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. So this is a shocking verse. Again, I'm just going to read it in English to make it go quickly here, so we don't have to read. Well, we'll go to the Hebrew. Let's do it. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Let me go to the Hebrew here. Only one verse. Okay, so Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16 says, we'll start in 15 just to get a little context. وَنَطَّعْتِ لَكُمْ رَعِيمْ كِلِبِي, and then, or I will give to you shepherds according to my heart. that follow my heart. We ra'u etchem de'ah ve'askel. And they will shepherd you to knowledge and understanding. Verse 16, and this is the verse that I wanted to bring here. Okay. So verse 16, this is Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Wihaya kitirbu ufritem ba'ares ba'yomim hahema nu'um Yahweh. So it shall be that when you increase in number and become fruitful in the land, in those days, declares Yahweh. So this is clearly an end of days prophecy, right? Lo yomru od, you shall no longer say, Aron Brit Yahweh. You shall no longer speak about Aron Brit Yahweh. Literally means the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, the ark of the covenant. We all know what the ark of the covenant is, right? It's a thing that Indiana Jones searched for, right? You shall no longer speak about, or you shall no longer say the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. Willo ya'aleh al lev, and it shall not literally come up in your heart. It shall not be, you shall not even pay attention to it or think about it. Velo iskarubo, and you shall not make mention of it. Velo ifkadu. Velo ya'aseod, and you will not try to find it, revisit it. Literally, they usually translate pakad as velo ya'aseod, and it shall not be remade. Okay? Ba'etahi, at that time, again, end of days prophecy here. Ba'etahi, at that time, Yikru'u Yerushalayim kisei Yahweh. At that time, they will declare Jerusalem to be the throne of Yahweh. Wanikwu eleha kol hagoyim, and all of the nations will. How do you say again in English? I can't think of the word in English. Will stream towards it, meaning towards Jerusalem. L'shem Yahweh leYerushalem, to in the name of Yahweh to Jerusalem. V'lo yelchu od achrei shrirut libam ha'ra, and they will no longer go after the literally shrirut or libam, the usually translated stubbornness of their heart, their evil stubbornness of their heart. Right. So this is. And let me just see. Let's even do verse 18. This is going back to the monologue that I gave, right? And this is clearly all end of days prophecies. In those days, al Beit Israel. So in those days, the house of Judah will go along with the house of Israel. And they will come together from the land of the north to the land which I have given as an inheritance to your fathers. Okay, so this is prophecy of the ingathering of the exiles. So we see that in this end of days prophecy, right? That the thing that I wanted to point out in verse 16 is that the Ark of the Covenant will not even be mentioned or remembered anymore, and it will not be remade. This is a shocking prophecy if it's taken at its face value, and it points to the idea that Yahweh is not a static God who gives us the laws and then just leaves them and never interacts with us again. He's constantly in a relationship, in a living, real relationship with him, and if that means updating the relationship based on new circumstances, then he has the right and the ability, and here the prophecy to do so. I know it's a shocking idea for those who think of God as like this kind of Greek, Hellenistic, static, distant deity who has no life to him, but that's not the Jewish conception. That's not the Israelite conception of what Yahweh is, and it's certainly not the Israelite conception of what the laws of the Torah are. The laws of the Torah are updatable, and aren't some of them. Again, there are some eternal laws that can never be updated, such as do not murder, would maybe be the classical example. But there's some which were given for certain reasons at certain times, in certain contexts. And here the context that I brought before of the giving of the meat sacrifices, that had a very contextual reason, because that's the way that ancient Near Eastern peoples, nations, worshipped or communicated with their deities, with their gods. Okay, so we drew from that, and then the entire book of Leviticus, but a lot of the book of Leviticus, which deals with the details of that, is telling us how to do it in an Israelite fashion, in a fashion that's acceptable to Yahweh. But that doesn't mean that has to be done for the end of times. In my personal opinion, against my personal opinion, my gut feeling, my intuition, that the meat sacrifices is not something eternal or canonical about them. It's something that served its purpose in its time and its place. So once we return from our exile in these lands, most notably the final large Jewish population center in the United States, and we return to Israel, then I believe, as I said earlier, that we will reconnect with Yahweh through the medium of prophecy, through which also he will elect or anoint a king from the line of David, a descendant of David, as ruler over the people of Israel. And of course, Yehuda and Israel will be rejoined. They broke apart after the death of Solomon. And at that point, now that we've reconnected with Yahweh through prophecy, he could give us Torah version 2.0, because he's not a static, dead God. He's not a distant, static deity like the Greek Hellenistic conception of God is. He's a living God. He's Elohim Chaim, and we're in a living, real relationship with him. And we see many examples where he changes things, changes his mind in the Torah. I was just speaking to someone the other day regarding he creates humanity, and then he regrets creating humanity, and then he destroys humanity in Genesis chapter 5 and 6, right? 6. And the flood that only Noah and his family survived. Okay? So anyway, enough of that. We got into a long tangent. Any questions or any comments regarding this? If not, then we'll go on to the next topic that I wanted to speak about today, which is going to be continuing to learn learn the words of Malachi, the prophet, the final book in the canon of the Tanakh, and a very interesting book. So let's take a break. I'll put on a song or two, just one song, just so I can catch my breath here. And let's see, what do we got? Mixed traditional music. Fine, let's go with that. You ever heard that? Okay, so just give me a minute or two, and then we will go on to our next topic. If you have any questions or any comments, please put them in the comments. And see you back in just a couple of minutes.
Alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos se hincharon Hodesh. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo cola, lo metió a detener. Mi madre hizo cola, lo metió a detener. Na, 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 na.
Okay, welcome back. And let me just get rid of these banners here. And let me just, hold on 1 second, please. Good, we got that. Okay, show them, I'm putting it outside. I'm gonna put the cat outside. Go outside. Baby. Okay, so I'd like to get into Malachi. So we got through the second chapter of Malachi last time. We'll continue in Malachi chapter 2. And we'll review a little bit about what we learned in the book of Malachi. Let me share the screen. And there we have it. Okay. So let's just review what we learned in Malachi. We started in chapter 1, and we saw there were two conversations, what's called dialectic, a dialogue between God, between Yahweh and the people of Israel. The first dialectic is initiated by Israel in this book, in this prophecy, in this poem, in this prose. And it's here. The title of the headline says it clearly. Israel doubts God's love. So Israel comes to Yahweh with a challenge or a question or a doubt. Okay? Israel says to God, I've loved you, but you ask, how have you loved us? And again, this is just review. And then Yahweh answers basically by saying, I'll prove to you that I loved you. I hated Esau and I loved you. And the proof of that is right here. I've turned his country into a wasteland. Excuse me. Left his inheritance to the desert jackals. So basically, Yahweh's answer, God's answer, is the proof is that look at your land, which is green and verdant and flourishing, and compare it to, and you're in people I love Jacob, and look at what I've done with your land. And then compare that with Esau's land, with the Edomite land, the land of Edom, which is essentially southern Jordan, Saudi Arabia. It's a desert wasteland. It was, and it will always remain so. Right? Even if they'll say, we'll rebuild the ruins, they may rebuild, but I will demolish. Okay? So it will always remain so. So that's the proof that I love you, is Yahweh's answer to Israel's question, to Israel's challenge. The proof is, look at your land, how beautiful and green it is, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of watercourses, and hills, and compare that with the land of Esau, and it's a barren wasteland. That's the proof. Okay. Now the next dialectic, the next dialogue, is initiated by Yahweh. So Israel had a problem with God. You claim you love us, but how do we know that? That was Israel's problem with God. Now God has a problem with Israel. And it's this: a son honors his father and a slave his master. If I am a father, where is the honor due me? If I am a master, where is the respect due me? Says Yahweh Almighty. So Yahweh is now challenging Israel. I'm your father, I'm your master. You're not treating me with the proper respect and the proper honor, the proper fear. And then he goes on again on this long tirade about how the Israelites, second here. Turn this on. How the Israelites were offering lame and diseased animals, how they were disrespecting the Lord's table. The table in this case, Shulchan Yahweh, refers to the altar of sacrifice, the altar that's in the courtyard of the tabernacle/temple. So basically, Yahweh chews out the Israelites, specifically the Kohanim. Okay, and we went through that last time. Because they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that the sacrifices are valid. And then he goes on, and again here the headline says, additional warning to the priests. Okay, if you don't listen, if you don't amend your ways, I will curse you. I will curse your blessings. The blessings, we know that the Levitical blessing is what the Kohanim are supposed to, or the blessing that word for word that the Kohanim are supposed to say to the people of Israel. Right, that's in number 6. So I'll turn that into a curse. I rebuke your descendants. I will take the crap, the dung from your festival sacrifices and smear it all over your face. Pretty graphic, right? And that's it. He goes on a tirade against the Kohanim. And that's the end of the tirade against the Kohanim. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick it up here in Malachi chapter 2, verse 10. And we'll go to the Hebrew, and let's at least get through chapter 2, and we can pick up chapter 3 next time. Okay. Let's check in and see if there are any comments or questions. Yes, this is here in Ladino. Correct. I lived in Portugal for 4 years, so I got very into Spanish, Portuguese, and Ladino music. Okay, so we're starting in Malachi chapter 2, verse 10. Let me just make sure it's visible on the screen there. And it is. Okay. Hello, Av Echad, Lekulanu. Hello, El Echad, Bira'anu. Let's go up to there. We see this little symbol here, this little wishbone-looking symbol, the Yatnach. That's like a semicolon. Is there not one Father to all of us? Is there not one God who has created us? Madua nivgad ish be'achiu, be'achiu, l'haler brit avotenu. Why has one man been unfaithful, betrayed his brother by profaning the covenant of our fathers? So this is going to be a tirade against who? Against Judah, against Yehuda. So, Bagda Yehuda, we to Eva Nista. Yehuda has been unfaithful, or Yehuda has betrayed and has done an abomination, has committed abomination by Israel u by Yerushalayim. So Judah has betrayed and has committed an abomination in Israel and in Jerusalem. Because Yehuda has profaned the Holy One, the holy things of Yahweh. And by the way, Hillel in Hebrew, it's Hillel Yehuda Kodesh Yahweh. Let's just go up to there, okay? Hillel Yehuda Kodesh Yahweh. So Hillel and Kodesh are opposites essentially. Hillel is a verb and Kodesh is a noun, but they express opposite ideas. Okay, Kodesh is that which is set aside, that which is special, specifically in the context of Yahweh. Kodesh Yahweh, it's that which is set aside for God. So, for instance, the sacrifices are Kodesh. The holy area of the tabernacle is Kodesh, the entire holy area. But then you have the inner sanctum, the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant, which we just saw in Jeremiah chapter 2, will eventually be forgotten. But these are these are special set-aside areas for Yahweh. And Hillel, usually translated as profane, but what it means is common, to make common. Okay? So the idea would be, is if I treat the Shabbat day as a Tuesday or a Wednesday, then I've made something that's Kodesh, that's set aside for Yahweh, into something that's just average. I haven't spit on it. I haven't, done something horrible on it. I haven't committed murder on Tuesday, hopefully. Well, sometimes I feel I'd like to. Against whatever. Just a joke. But what I've done is, by not treating it as something special, something that's set aside, something that's delineated, that's something that's cordoned off as special to Yahweh, then I've profaned it by just making it an average thing rather than accepting or relating to the specialness of it. Okay? So Chilel Yehuda Kodesh Yahweh. So Yehuda has made ordinary that which is special to Yahweh, that which is specially set aside for Yahweh. How did he do it? Asher ahev uba'al bat el nechar. By or in that he loved and became the husband, married, took as a wife, became the husband over bat el nechar, the literally the daughter of a foreign god. Okay. Let's get an English translation on that, and then we'll look at a little commentary. So Judah has desecrated the sanctuary of the Lord. The Lord loves by marrying women who worship a foreign god. Okay. I'm not sure that's a good translation. Let's see what Robert Alter has to say about that one. He's usually very good. Whoop. Where are we here? Yeah, so he translates it more literally the way I would translate it. For Judah profaned the Lord's sanctity that he loved and coupled with the daughter of an alien god. Okay, so what's a daughter of an alien god? Okay, the prophet here, like Ezra, inveighs against mixed marriages, though he may be referring simply to sexual relations with foreign women. Calling such a woman daughter of an alien god is a way of stressing the involvement of non-Israelite in paganism. Okay, that's what Robert Alter says. I'm not sure I understand it that way. I'm just reading again my own. I'm not sure I understand it. I think I understand this more metaphorically. And holy shit, what the hell was that? Roof here, something like that. Excuse me. My God. I have no idea what's going on. All right. Sometimes these things happen here in the Golan Heights. Okay. I think this might be more metaphorically. Literally, it says is loved and taken and become the husband of, or become husband of the daughter of a foreign god. So I think this might mean something more metaphorically. In other words, has turned over to idol worship. But we'll just leave it at that. Okay. Verse 12. Yahret Yahweh la'ish asher ya'asena. So Yahweh will cut off any man who does this. May the Lord cut off. It's called abusive, expressing the idea of may, or I hope, or I pray that such and such would happen, which is one of the uses of, or one of the moods, I don't think that's the technical word, one of the ideas that the future or imperfect tense in Hebrew expresses. Just give me 1 second here, please. Just look something up very quickly. One second, please. One second. Okay. Any rate, so may the Lord cut off the man who does this. Okay. Ed, I think this is a mistake in the text here. I think this should be Ed. Did you see something here? It doesn't matter. We'll just go with Ed for now. Okay. Oops. So Ed v'onei me'ole Yaakov. Okay. And a witness and an answer from the tents of Yaakov. Magish mincha li Yahweh tziva'ot. And one who brings a grain offering, who brings an offering to Yahweh of hosts. Okay. And what is this referring to? Let's try to get a little commentary on this. Okay. The received text says "ere one awake," which this translation, following one version of the Septuagint, amends to "ed." Given the parallelism with the bringer of grain offering to the Lord, this would refer to a priestly function, perhaps bearing witness in legal matters. It's a bit obscure. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so it does actually say "ere" in the text, but it might have been a textual error. It might have actually originally in the earlier text been "ed." Okay. Verse 13. Wazot shenith ta'asu, and this you shall do, and this also you shall do, or this for a second time you shall do, secondly you shall do. Kasot dima et mizbach Yahweh. Bechi wa an naka me'en od penot el hamincha. Lekachat ratzon miedchem. So this also you shall do. Sotima et mizbach Yahweh, you shall be covering or cover. Oh, my cap's looking. Cover. Sure, you want to come in, sweetie, but you can't go. You can't drive me crazy. Okay, come, baby, come. You have to sit here. Okay, come, right there. Good. Kasotima et mizbach Yahweh. Okay, so to cover. Or tears shall cover the altar of Yahweh. Again, the sacrificial altar of Yahweh. Bechi wa anaka. Bechi is crying or wailing, and anaka. No, I guess bechi would be crying, and anaka would be wailing. Me'en od penot el mincha. Because od penot el mincha velakachat ratzon miedchem. Because he's no longer turning towards the offering and to take it willingly from you. Okay, and let's get a Robert Alter on that one. Okay. A witness of that, and this besides did you do cause to cover with tears the Lord's altar with weeping and groans, because there is no more turning to the grain offering or accepting with favor from your hands. A bit of it, the Hebrew is a bit obscure. Let's get a little commentary on that. While the literal sense of the Hebrew is simply covered with tears, this could not be the act of the priests, for that would suggest profound contrition. Rather, by consorting with alien women, the priests impel God to reject their offering on the altar, and thus the people serve as stricken with despair and weep in the temple. Okay. Let's go on to 14. So basically, let's just summarize here what we've said so far. Okay. So here, Yahweh or Malachi is accusing Judah of betraying of betraying the holy area or the holy things of Yahweh. And then Malachi is saying, may God cut off such a person. Okay? And not only did Judah do that, but he's figuratively speaking, he's covered the altar of Yahweh, Mizbach Yahweh, with tears, crying, and wailing and moaning, because Yahweh will no longer accept his sacrifices with happiness. Okay? So this is essentially what this is a tirade against Judah, just to be had in the first part of Malachi 1, a tirade against the priests, against the Kohanim. Here we have a tirade against Judah for turning to idol worship, or if we want to accept these verses literally, for marrying the daughters of idol worshippers. But I don't think this is meant to be literal. Okay? So this is what Judah has done. This is the way Judah has betrayed God by turning to idol worship, by not respecting the holy sanctity or the holy sanctuary of Yahweh. And so therefore, instead of offerings being put on the altar of Yahweh, instead tears, crying, and wailing are put on the altar, and Yahweh will not accept their offerings, their sacrifices. Okay? Verse 14. V'martem alma. And you say, for why? For what? Why? Why are you mad at us? Or why will you not accept our offerings? And Yahweh answers, or Malachi answers in the name of Yahweh. Al-ki. Yahweh ha'id bencha uben eshet ne'orecha, because Yahweh has been a witness between you and between the wife of your youth. Asher ata bagadta ba wahi chavertecha va'eshet britecha, because you have betrayed her, you've been unfaithful to her, literally betrayed her. And she is your bosom buddy and the woman of your covenants, the wife of your covenant. In other words, you made it of your contract, covenant. You made a contract with her that she should be your wife and you should be her husband. And you've done this from an early age, and you betrayed this woman. You betrayed your bosom wife, is what this is saying. And this, I think, again, the way I'm reading it, is this is an analogy to Yehuda betraying Yahweh by not respecting, and of course the sanctuary is in Jerusalem, which is in Yehuda. Yehuda not respecting the sacred parts of the sanctuary of Yahweh. So if I'm reading this correctly, we can get some commentary on it. In this case, Yahweh is being likened to the Eshet Neorecha, the wife of Judah's youth, the wife that Judah has had since he was young, but now he is betrayed. Okay? If I'm reading this correctly, we'll try to get some commentary on it. That's my take on it. Verse 15. Actually, let's see if we can get some commentary here. It was you who betrayed her when she was your friend and covenanted wife. Okay, since the next verse explicitly mentions divorce, one must conclude that the prophet actually rejects divorce as a betrayal of one's wife. The view puts aside the legislated provision for divorce in the Torah is an attitude adopted by Jesus in Matthew. Okay, so this is Robert Alter. This is a commentary on the Tanakh, but he is referring to the New Testament. And I'm sorry, whenever I have to refer to the New Testament, I always have to give the disclaimer that I am in no way, shape, or form a Christian or Messianic Jew. Those who are involved in the Karaite world will understand why sometimes I have to make that clarify that point. But I will sometimes refer to the New Testament, as Robert Alter does here, for historical reasons. At any rate, that's what he's saying. So basically, he's saying that he's taking this quite literally and saying this is the rejection of the idea of divorce, even though divorce is allowed for in the Torah. And where is that? Let's find it for a second. That is going to be in Deuteronomy 24:1, which we won't go to right now. At any rate, right? Deuteronomy 24:1, right here. So, but I take this all. I'm disagreeing with his commentary here, and maybe there's some other commentaries that were more in line with me. The way I'm seeing this is that this is not meant literally. Let me read it one more time in my head. Well, I guess because Yahweh is the witness, it wouldn't make sense. So, So maybe it is actually speaking about a husband and wife because it says that Yahweh is the witness. All right, let's go with that. Verse 15. V'lo echad asa u'sha'ar ruach lo. So that's verse 15. So literally, he did not just do one. One did just not do this, and the rest, ruach lo, was his spirit. I don't know. This is kind of, esoteric kind of Hebrew phraseology here. So we'll just go with Robert Alter's translation. I'm sorry we went with other translations. There would be other opinions because the wording is not clear here in the Hebrew at all. Okay, and did not one do right who has exceeding spirit? And what does the one seek? Seed of God. Okay. Zera Elohim. This is very esoteric Hebrew. It doesn't really make sense to me, and I'm sure that if we went to 5 different translations, or 5 different translations, we get 5 different opinions as to what all this means. But let's just go with Robert Alter's. When Yishmartem beruchachem ube'esh yorecha al yivgod. So you shall keep your spirit in check, maybe. Ube'esh yorecha al yivgod, and you shall not betray the wife of your youth. Okay. Verse 16, Kisane shalach amar Yahweh. So this explicitly does say that because he hates someone who divorces, who sends away his, and this is referring to the wife of his youth. Amar Yahweh, says Yahweh, Elohei Yisrael, the God of Israel. Kisah hamas al livusho, and has covered over the violence in his garment, meaning figurative way of saying that he's like he's stained with blood, but he covers it over with a garment. Amar Yahweh Tzebaot declares or says Yahweh of hosts, but you shall keep your spirit in check and not betray. And let's just get a little commentary on that. And you should guard yourselves with your spirit and not betray the wife of your youth, for I hate divorce, says the Lord God of Israel, and one who covers his garb with outrage, says the Lord of armies. You shall guard yourselves with your spirit and not betray. You have wearied the Lord with your words. And okay, that goes on to the next already. Okay, that's verse 17. Hogatem Yahweh b'divrechem. You wearied Yahweh with your words. V'amatem bama hoganu. And you say, what? How have we, or in what way have we wearied? V'emerchem kol oser ratov. When you say that kol oser ra, you say about anyone who does evil, that is tov be'enei Yahweh, that is good in the eyes of Yahweh, ubehem hu chafetz, and that Yahweh desires such a person, or Yahweh is favorable to such a person, or ayeh Elohei HaMishpat, or where is the God of judgment? Okay, so this is much more simple Hebrew. This, I don't know. I have to go over this and look at different commentaries. We'll just leave this section for what it is. We'll just go with one commentary, transition to commentary for now, but this is much more clear. Okay, so Gatam Yahweh b'divrechem. So you have you've mocked or wearied. You've wearied God. You've wearied Yahweh with your words. What are these words? Again, speaking to Judah, to Yehuda. And yet you say, what? How have we wearied? How have we wearied you? Okay. Because you say about every person who does evil, what do you say about them? Tov be'enei Yahweh, that they've done good, or they are good in the eyes of Yahweh. And he wants them, he likes them, he desires them. Or you say, Aye Elohim Mishpat. You say, where is the God of judgment? Okay, in other words, you say you doubt God's ability to punish the evildoers. Okay. And let's see a little commentary on that. So that's verse 15. So going back to this. Okay, so that whole section is a bit and even Robert Alter here admits that the entire sentence is obscure. So I'm just going to skip ahead. So this verse might be the introduction to the prophecy recorded in the next chapter, because the malfeasance now is not divorce, but general perversion or rejection of divine justice. Okay? So maybe we're going to stop here, because I do want to get onto Leviticus 23, even though this is very interesting stuff. I think we're going to stop there, and we'll pick this up next week. And we'll go on to Leviticus chapter 23. Okay? Any questions, any comments? Okay. If not, let's go on to Leviticus chapter 23, and I really do want to finish Leviticus chapter 23 today. And Malachi chapter 3 is a bit less obscure. The Hebrew is a bit more straightforward there. At any rate, let's go over to Leviticus chapter 23, and we're up to the final of the holidays. Hebrew. Let me find it here. So Leviticus chapter 23. Okay. So we're picking it up in verse 33. So when we're in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33, we've gone through all of the holidays. We've spoken about it a lot, so I'm not going to go over it again. And we're finally up to Sukkoth, Chag Sukkoth. So Chag Sukkoth is the holiday which represents the end of the agricultural year. The agricultural year in Israel lasts essentially 6 months. It's from the beginning of the first month until essentially the end of the 7th month. So I guess that would be 7 months, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because it's inclusive. So it lasts 7 months. Okay, and it starts, the agricultural season kicks off. Oh, really 6 months, because the agricultural season kicks off around Passover time, which is the 15th of the first month. And I guess we could say, exactly 6 months, actually, when we think about it this way. So it kicks off with Passover, which occurs on the 15th of the first month. That's going to be about when the first harvest in Israel is ready. That's going to be the barley harvest. So Passover specifically does not kick off the barley harvest, but the bringing of the Omer offering, the Tenufat Omer, usually called the wave sheaf offering, right? That's the official kickoff of the barley harvest. And it's traditionally, I hate to use the word traditionally, but it seems to be associated with Passover or with Chag HaMatzot, okay? And in fact, Karaites usually understand the day of the Omer offering to be the day after the one and only Shabbat that falls within the 7 days of Passover. Since Passover, show how we have to go over there, okay? Since Passover, Chag HaMatzot lasts exactly 7 days, it's going to cover each day of the week once. That means there'll be one and only one Shabbat within Passover, within Chag HaMatzot, and the day following that one and only one Shabbat is going to be traditionally the way Karaites understand, although again it's not explicit and there is some discussion about it in Karaite circles, but it's usually understood that the day after that one Shabbat is the day that the Omer offering is going to be brought, which means essentially that Passover is the kickoff Passover is what we call it colloquially. The real name of the holiday is Chag HaMatzot, Festival of Unleavened Bread, is going to be the kickoff of the agricultural season, which starts with the first fruits of the first harvest, the earliest harvest in the land of Israel, which should be ready soon, about another 2 months, and that's going to be the barley harvest. The festival week, Shavuot, is associated, we've seen, with the wheat harvest. It's another wave offering. This is Shavuot. And it's a wave offering of 2 loaves, okay, of wheat flour. So this is the first fruits festival week. So Chag Shavuot is the first fruits holiday of the wheat harvest, which comes 50 days later after or 50 days after, actually 49 days after, specifically after the bringing of the Omer offering, after the first fruits offering of the barley harvest. And then the next, so then we arrive at the 7th month. And the 7th month, we have a bunch of festivals. We spoke about this last week. Zikaron Teruah, as it's called in the Hebrew, is a day that we shout out to heaven with trumpets, with shofar, with singing, with shouting, with however we can, to get Yahweh's attention so he'll remember us. Why do we want him to remember us? Because on the 10th day, we're asking for forgiveness. The festival of, or the holiday of Yom Kippurim, as we see in Leviticus chapter 16, which we learned earlier when we went through Leviticus, is really associated with sins connected to, first and foremost, is associated with sins connected to the defiling of Yahweh's sanctuary. So bringing improper sacrifices, not following the rules of the sacrifices, not being in a state of ritual cleanliness, of tahara, when approaching the holy areas of the sanctuary. That's first and foremost what it is, to gain atonement for that. To gain, it's more than forgiveness, atonement. Basically, as I said last week, it's the holiday that we ask Yahweh to forget. So sometimes I like to call the festival, I'll call Yom Teruah, which they translate here as the festival of trumpets. Some people call it the festival of noise making. I'll sometimes call it the festival of getting Yahweh to remember, and the Day of Atonement of getting Yahweh to forget. And we spoke about that last week. We actually said that if we look in the Hebrew, that Yom Teruah, right? It's not even called Yom Teruah. It's called Zikaron Teruah. So it's a day, quote unquote, in parentheses. It's a remembrance through shouting out to heaven. Here they call it the Feast of Trumpets. Sometimes they'll call it the Day of Shouting. It's translated in all different ways. The essential idea is we shout out to heaven to get him to remember us, to get Yahweh to remember us. And then we spoke about Yom Kippurim, and we spoke about how the word Kippurim comes from the underlying root kafar, chaf peresh, which means to cover. And figuratively means we're asking Yahweh to cover over his eyes. I pointed to the article I wrote in Karaite Insights, which shows this figurative meaning. So for instance, when Yaakov gives gifts to Esav, it says, Achpara panav, I will cover over his face with these gifts. It's a common figure of speech in biblical Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, right? The covering over one's face, the covering over one's eyes to get them to forget something. And that's what we're asking Yahweh to do on Yom Kippurim. How are we doing that? By showing that we're sorry, by showing that we take our sins, that we acknowledge and are explicitly asking forgiveness for our sins. And we do that by fasting, right? Where is that in Hebrew? Here. Or here, you shall afflict your souls, which I'm not going to prove here, but is related. We could see in other places in Tanakh that afflicting your souls, this phrase is related to fasting. Okay, so by fasting, and perhaps also by sitting on the floor, wearing sackcloth, putting ash on our heads, all of these ways that in ancient Israel, people acknowledged and showed their regret for their indiscretions, that by doing this, we are getting Yahweh to forget, to cover over his eyes and to forget our indiscretions, first and foremost with relationship to any indiscretions we may have had, any indiscretions we have had with regard to the holy areas and the holy items of Yahweh. And I think secondarily, and really only secondarily, the general sins that we've committed. Really, the focus of Yom Kippurim is the holy areas, is the tabernacle / temple. Okay. All right. So then we get to Sukkot. And Sukkoth it's a harvest festival, but it's also a festival that we can celebrate now that hopefully we've called out to Yahweh to get him to remember us for all our good deeds, repented for our sins, and asked him to forget all of our sins. So now, hopefully, we've cleared the books out, so to speak. And I hate to use the word book because the rabbis come up with this idea, which has absolutely no basis in the Tanakh, of being written in the book of life or the book of death. It's a nice little story. Maybe it has some kind of didactic value, but it's certainly not explicit here. At any rate, now hopefully we've worked things out with Yahweh. We've cleared out our accounts with him, and now we can celebrate the fact that we're getting a fresh start with him, that he's forgiven us, and also celebrate the fact that it's the end of the agricultural year. So the agricultural year really starts from if Passover, if Chag HaMatzot starts on the 15th day of the first month, and Chag Sukkot starts on the 15th day of the 7th month, and that is going to be 6 months exactly, down to the day. And that's what we're going to learn about now. Chag Sukkot, and we're going to start in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33. Let me just check in here and see if there are any comments, questions. So, Vayidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, and basically all of the holidays start this way. Vayidaber Moshe lemor, Vayidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, right? Vayidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. This is the typical introductory sentence. So, Daber el Bnei Israel lemor, speak to the children of Israel to say, B'hamisha asar yom l'chodesh hashvi'i, on the 15th day of the 7th month, hashvi'i hazeh, of 15th day of this 7th month, of this particular month being the 7th month, Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim le Yahweh, is a festival of Sukkot, the festival of tabernacles, the festival of booths, for 7 days to Yahweh. Bayom harishon mikra kodesh, kol malechet avodah lo ta'asu. So the first day is a holy convocation, a declaration that it's a holy day, or perhaps a calling together. Mikro can mean declare, to call. We'll go with a declaration. They usually call it a holy convocation. It's the way it's usually translated. It's a horrible translation. Convocation means a calling together. Con means together, even in Spanish, right? Con means with, right? In Portuguese, com means with, same word. In Latin, the prefix con means together. And vocation, vocation like vocal, right, is a calling out. This is a calling together. I wonder if Robert Alter gives a better translation than convocation. I hate that word. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows what it means. So let's see here. How does he translate? He also translates as a convocation. I can't stand the word convocation. I usually just say calling together or declaration. So at any rate, so the first day is a declaration of coming together. Kol malechet avodah lo ta'asu, you shall not do any work-like things. And remember, we spoke last week about the difference between the phrase that's used in every single one of the holidays aside from Shabbat, which is not technically a holiday, and Yom Kippurim. The phrase malechet avodah is used, whereas in the case of Yom Kippurim, the word milacha is used. Let's find it here. Milacha, verse 28. In the case of Shabbat, the word milacha is used. In the case of every single one of the other holidays, the word milacha is not used. Instead, the phrase malechet avodah is used. And we spoke about how this implies onomatopoeically, it's more sing-songy. It's less harsh. So the implication is that there's a less of a harsh restriction or less of a strict restriction on doing work on these festival days, aside from Yom Kippurim, which is likened to a Shabbat, where there's a very strict restriction from doing work, as is the case on the Shabbat. Okay? At any rate, shall not do any work-like things, any worky works. Shivat Yamim, Akrivu Ishel Yahweh. So for 7 days you shall bring a fire offering. Fire offering is very specifically means anything that's called a fire offering means an offering that's thrown on the altar. That's the altar, the copper-covered altar in the courtyard of the tabernacle / temple. Window a little bit here. Bayom Shmini Mikra Kodesh. So on the 8th day, what's known as Shmini Atzeret, colloquially, is also a declaration of coming together. Okay, it's the declaration of a holy day for coming together. Yelechem shall be for you. Vikravtem Misheli Yahweh, and you shall also bring, or you shall bring a fire offering to Yahweh. Atzeret ki kol malechet avodah lo ta'asu. It's an atzeret. Atzeret is a difficult word to translate. Let's see how they translate it here. They translate it as sacred assembly. I don't like that translation at all. Here, they translate it as, oops. This solemn gathering. I'm not sure I like that translation either. The way I understand the word atzeret, right? It comes from the underlying root atzar, ayin tzadi resh. We can even look at that very briefly, which means to stop or halt. Okay. Okay. Restrain, retain, shut up, slack, stay, stop, halt. So stay maybe is the best way that I would like to translate it. That's the way I understand it. So the way I've always explained this 8th day, this atzeret, this 8th day, which is technically, one second, so this 8th day of Sukkoth, okay, this Atzeret, is that Yahweh, before we all disperse to our tents, to our homes for the winter, remember these are all pilgrimage holidays. The three agricultural holidays are also pilgrimage holidays. So Passover, so Chag HaMatzot, is a pilgrimage holiday. Shavuot is a pilgrimage holiday, and Sukkot is a pilgrimage holiday. These are the days these are the holidays on which every male is supposed to go up to the tabernacle, later the temple in Jerusalem, right? Every male in Israel. So before all of Israel, which we have now celebrated this final harvest festival, and harvest festivals were and still are to this day common throughout all the world, okay? But of course, this is the Torah's take on a harvest festival. So before all of Israel disperses to their own houses for the winter time, for the next almost 6 months, where there's not much going on in terms of agriculture, right? We can look at the Gezer calendar. Maybe we'll do that in a second. No, I don't want to sidetrack too much, okay? But the wintertime, there's not much going on. There's some plowing and there's some planting of seeds, but that's about it. Then you wait for the next spring to come, because things don't grow. I shouldn't say they don't grow. In the land of Israel, as anyone knows who lives here, everything really starts growing once the rains come, and the rains come around Sukkoth time. Things start greening up, but nothing is ready for the next 6 months. Everything is just at that point beginning to sprout. And when will it be ready? It's ready in Passover time, which is in the civil calendar, March or April. Okay, so this one last day, the way I understand it is, the way I always explain it, is that Yahweh wants this one last day where we stay behind, where we stay, atzeret, remember, coming from the underlying root atzar, which means to stay, stop, right? In modern Hebrew, atzor means stop, or if you're arrested by the police, God forbid, they otzer otcha, right, the policeman arrests you, okay? So even in modern Hebrew, it means, okay? So, so this one last day where we stay behind, one last day, Yahweh wants one last day with his beloved nation, with his beloved people. He's going to miss us. I know this sounds almost like I'm anthropomorphizing God, and I'm anthropomorphizing Yahweh, but if anyone has ever read any of my writings and any of my ideas that I've expressed, I don't think I'm doing that. Yahweh is extremely emotional. He loves, he hates, he misses us. He cares about us. He feels betrayed by us. He feels angry when he's betrayed. He can lash out when that anger cannot be controlled, just like we as human beings do. We're made in his image. So if we're made as emotional beings, then he's emotional as well. Okay? Some people think that emotions are just, a sign of deviation from the ways of God, from the ways of Yahweh. And I don't think this bears itself out at all in the Tanakh. The emotions that Yahweh gives us, these feelings of love, of hatred, of betrayal, of anger, of loss, of missing us, these are in us because they're in Yahweh. Okay? So I think that the way I've always explained the holiday of Atzeret is he's going to miss us. We're gone for 6 months. We're not going to see him. And I don't mean this is like some like Hasidic story kind of thing. I really mean this is literally why he instituted this holiday. He wants one more day with his beloved nation Israel. Remember, he loves the nation of Israel. We're his favorite nation, whether the rest of the nations like it or not. We're his favorite son, just as Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob. And Joseph essentially was the firstborn of Jacob. He was made the firstborn. What's the proof of that? His two sons, Menashe and Ephraim, each got status as tribes alongside with the other 11 brothers. Right, so there are essentially 13 tribes of Israel, not 12. The Levites are taken out because they're not given a land inheritance. So he loves us. He's going to miss us. So he wants one last day with his nation Israel. He wants to see us all assembled there, all rejoicing with him, all sacrificing to him, all worshiping him, giving him the honor that he deserves as a father and the fear that he deserves as a master, as we saw in Malachi chapter 1, right? So that's the way I understand the idea of Atzeret. Okay? And on this 8th day of Sukkot, I guess some would say it's not technically part of Sukkot, but I think that's already just semantics. I think it is basically part of Sukkot. So on this day, what do we saw it's a Mikra Kodesh, a declaration of a holy day for coming together on a holy day. And we don't do any work-like things. Melechet Avodah, there's that phrase Melechet Avodah rather than Melacha. So less strict, okay, refraining from work, lo ta'asu, okay, you shall not do. Okay, so any questions so far? We'll finish up soon. Shalom Zev, ma shlomcha? Okay, so let's finish this off. So any questions so far? No? So then we get a summary sentence. Okay? So the Torah works with introductory sentences and summary sentences. And I think this is really important to understand. Okay, we have an introductory sentence here. This is the introductory sentence for the Moadim, for the yearly holidays, what's usually translated as the appointed times. Okay? Ele Moed Yahweh. Sorry. אלה מועדי יהוה, מקראי קודש, אשר תקראו אותם במועדם. These are the appointed times of Yahweh, the yearly holidays of Yahweh, which you shall declare, or Mikra Kodesh, holy declarations of holy days or of coming together. Asher tikru otam b'mo'adam, that you should declare them in their correct times. Okay? That's the opening, and then we go through all of the holidays, right? The 5 different holidays. Now we get a closing sentence here. Okay? Elamode Yahweh, asher tikru otam b'mikra kodesh. Okay? This is the closing sentence. It's almost word for word the same as the opening sentence. So here we have Elamo de Yahweh, Shetikru Otam Mikra Kodesh. These are the appointed times of Yahweh, which you shall declare them as holy convocations. And here we have, okay, Elamo de Yahweh, Mikra Kodesh, Shetikru Otam B'mo'adam. Right? So very similar sentence. So we see that this is a closing sentence, and this is very common in the Torah. We have opening sentences, and then we have closing sentences, okay, that introduce a topic, and then that end the topic. So as they say, right, one of the things they always say about teaching, and if the Torah is nothing else, it's didactic. It is a masterclass on how to teach orally. And please do not confuse this with me with the quote unquote oral law of the rabbis, right? The Torah was read. People didn't have Torah scrolls. They didn't have internet. They didn't have books. Books weren't invented until the 1400s, 1300s, right? So the only way there were only the only places that Torah scrolls existed were they were kept by the priests in the temple. The king had a copy of it. That's explicit, right? The king has to have a copy of the Torah for this very reason, that he can look through it, they can read it. He needs to have a copy of this text, of this book, to be able to read it and access it when he needs it. Because it's not taken for granted as it is today that everyone can access the text of the Torah. So the way that the Torah was transmitted in ancient times, and the way most documents were transmitted in ancient times, was through being read aloud, public readings. This is why we have their explicit commandments to read the Torah aloud, right? So we have, let's find it here for 1 second. Deuteronomy 31:11. We can go to that for a second. Let's go to call 31. Oh boy, that's not what I meant to do. There it is. Right, so public reading of the law. This is Deuteronomy 31:11. I'll just read it in English so we can go through it quickly. So Moses wrote down this law and gave it to the Levitical priests. Okay, so we see who has a copy of the law, the Kohanim. Okay, let's just bring this up in Hebrew for 1 second. It's Deuteronomy 31. Okay, let's do it. I'll translate from the Hebrew. Okay, so this is Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 9. Okay, well, I'm going to do it in English just so we can, I don't want to sidetrack too much. Okay, give it to the Levitical priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. I just want to check one thing here. So it was given to the Kohanim and to the elders of Israel. Okay. So does this mean copies, different copies of it, or does it mean he wrote one? I think it implies here that he wrote one copy of this. He wrote all this down and gave it over to the priests, the Kohanim, for safekeeping. Right? The Kohanim served many purposes, and one of the purposes is, in a sense, to preserve the transmission, right? To preserve the integrity of the law that Moses got from Yahweh, and to judge the people based on it. So they also need a copy of it, right? We saw that in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 9. And to the elders of Israel. So I think there's one copy that was then handed over to the priests, essentially. Okay? Then Moses commanded them at the end of every 7 years, in the year of canceling debts, that's the quote-unquote Shemitah year, which we'll get to, that's in Leviticus chapter 25, during the festival of tabernacles, when all Israel comes to appear before Yahweh your God at the place he shall choose, he shall read this law to them before them in their hearing. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and foreigners residing in town, so they can listen and learn to fear Yahweh your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. The children who do not know this law must hear it and learn to fear Yahweh your God as long as you live in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. Okay? So that's what we see. So what part of the law are we talking about? This whole discussion. Let's just pretend for now it's the entire Torah, the entire 5 books of Moses, which one could make an argument for. Okay? So it's required to be read aloud on Sukkoth every 7 years, right? Where? At the temple, or the tabernacle/temple, later the temple. The entire book, so that all of Israel will understand what this law is saying. That's the way law was transmitted in ancient times. It was transmitted essentially orally, because it was too hard. You could not own your own Torah scroll. As someone I used to learn with used to say, in order to own your whole Torah scroll, you have to slaughter an entire flock of sheep, and then process the skin into parchment, and then you have to have someone write the entire text of the Torah and then proofread it, and that's the way these were called manuscripts. There was no such thing other than manuscripts until the invention of the printing press. Manuscripts means manu, meaning hand, like in Spanish mano means hand, or manual in English, and script means writing. So that's the only way that texts were copied, right? From one copy to another. And of course, errors, each time a text was copied, errors were introduced. Some of those errors made their way down into the later text, into the Masoretic text. We saw an example one before in Malachi chapter 2, where it says er ve'oseh, er ve'oneh, and Robert Alter made the comment that it was probably originally ed ve'oneh, right? That because of Daled, let's see, it's Daled in the ancient script. Well, maybe it's later already when the Asherite script, the square script, Daled in the square Assyrian script that's used today, looks like a resh. So if it already that error 8. Hey, I'm sure what you're doing. It's not funny. This is not a cat cafe here. Get over here. Get over here. Want to go out for a little while and run around? Go run around for a little while. Go. I have 2 cats. One cat is extremely active, that's Shoham. The other one just lies there like a lump all day long. That's Lavi. Shosha, what are you doing? What planet Earth are you doing? Oh my God. All right. Any rate. So that's the way. So since it was so rare and so expensive and so difficult to copy a text in ancient times, up to the invention of the printing press, the way that information was, well, there were 2 main ways. One was, such as the Code of Hammurabi, that's why it was even found. One was that it was displayed in a public place. It was written, it was chiseled into stone or some other method and displayed in a public place. And the other way is that it was read aloud. And this is one of the proofs, without getting too far off track, which I'm sorry we're already doing, But this is one of the proofs of the Karaite approach, because the Torah was, this to me is one of the proofs of the Karaite approach, because the Torah was meant to be read aloud to everybody. You didn't need interpretation. You didn't need long books to allow the people to understand it. The Torah itself was meant to be understood in a public reading when read aloud by the average Israelite. We see that right here in Deuteronomy chapter 31. If the Torah is this obscure document that has to be understood and interpreted by an elitist or an elite sequestered scribal class, as essentially that's what the rabbis believe, we need their interpretations, their understandings in order to understand it, which may be the case in later years when Israel got disconnected from its own land and its own culture, but then the rabbis came in and took advantage of that to make some, a bizarre version of the Torah. But in ancient Israel, the Torah itself was understandable by the common person. Again, another this same person that I used to learn with always say something along the lines of any understanding or any interpretation of the Torah that would not have been understood by an Israelite shepherd in a public reading could not be correct. And that's right on target. That's 100% on target. The Torah itself is a didactic document. It's a document of teaching that already includes many aspects of teaching of anyone who's ever taught school or anything else, taught classes, knows, right? Or even taught their own children, knows that there are certain techniques that you have to use, such as repetition. The Torah constantly repeats itself again and again and again. Like, Dad, stop already. You told us that 1,000,000 times, right? That's what the Torah does. It repeats Shabbat. I don't even know. I can't remember the exact count. At least 10 times in the Torah, not in the Tanakh. Shabbat is mentioned. The holidays are mentioned in a number of different places. Many things are mentioned again and again, and also it's associative. It's as I like to say, it's the earliest. I don't know about the earliest, but I'll call it that. An early hyperlinked document, right? Where it jumps from topic to topic based on association, the way people might remember, not in some like formal order. It'll jump from one thing to the other. So we saw actually in Leviticus 23 is a perfect example that in Leviticus 23, where is it? Let me just find it for a second. Here. So after the holiday of Shavuot, which speaks about bringing the 2 loaves of wheat to kick off the wheat harvest, right? First fruits offering of the wheat harvest. Then it says in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest, right? This is pe'an leket. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I'm Yahweh, your Lord, right? This has nothing to do with the holidays per se, but it's associated. It's a logical jump. It's a way to remember it. If we're talking about bringing the first fruits of the wheat harvest, if we're talking about the wheat harvest, then this is a perfect time for the Torah to stick in this idea of leave the corners of your field for the poor and don't go back over when you cut your grain. Don't go back and pick up every last stalk. Leave some for the poor and for the ger. Okay, that's an example of the Torah working associatively. It's going from a topic to another topic that's related, not in some kind of formal way like alphabetical or all of the laws of the first month, all of the laws of the second month. It's a didactic document. It's a document that is an expert that shows expertise in methods of teaching, in methods of oratory. It uses words. We saw that before. That for most of the Moedim, it uses the phrase Malechet Avodah, and for Shabbat and Yom Kippurim, it uses the word Milacha. Think how that is going to be heard by an ear, right? On Shabbat, you don't do Milacha. On Yom Kippurim, you don't do Milacha. On the other holidays, you don't do Malechet Avodah, right? It just hits differently in the ear. And this is the only way that the Torah can really be understood in its context. Let me just open this for 1 second here. Okay. So how do we get onto that? Well, let's unwind and get back to Leviticus 23. I really want to finish Leviticus 23. I really want to finish it and go on to Leviticus 24. So, right. So this is the summary. This is a summarizing sentence. El moedei Yahweh shetikru otam mikrei kodesh nakriv ishel Yahweh, to bring a fire offering to Yahweh. Okay. Ola wa mincha zevach u nisachim devar yom biyomo. Okay, so this is now talking about bringing the fire offerings. Again, we said anything that's called a fire offering, that's an offering that's thrown on the altar of sacrifice. And olah is usually translated as a burnt offering, but I like to translate it as a fully burnt offering. The entire animal is thrown onto the fire, except for certain unacceptable pieces like the skin that are removed. But the rest of the animal is thrown and fully burnt on the sacrificial pyre. Mincha, zevach nisachim. So these are the grain offerings and the wine offerings that go with it. The libation offerings that go with it. Okay. Devar yom biyomo. So each day according to its its day, right? Each day according to its law. So this is all summary language. Okay, it's telling us. I remember how I got into this. So what is the Torah doing? It's doing what the classic method for teaching, right? Which is tell us what the teacher is supposed to. A good teacher tells you what he's going to tell you, or tells you what she's going to tell you, tells you what he or she's going to tell you, then tells you it, and then tells you what he or she told you. And that's exactly what the Torah is doing here. Here's the introductory sentence. It's telling us what the Torah is going to tell us, or what the section of the Torah is going to tell us. Then it tells us it, and then it tells us what it told us. And that's what this is. This is a summary sentence. Okay? Mirvad Shabbatot Yahweh. Okay, so this already shows that, and we mentioned this when we started studying Leviticus chapter 23, that Shabbat is not considered a moed. It's associated with a moed. That's another example of the way the Torah works associatively, right? Shabbat is lumped together with the moedim because it occurs once a week, but it's not a moed. Specifically, a moed is a holiday that occurs once a year. It's a yearly festival, not a weekly festival. But here we have Shabbat lumped together with it, and those many people who don't really understand the way the Torah works will say that Shabbat is also a moed. Okay, because it says in verse 1, before it introduces Shabbat, it says it's going to tell us about, okay, the Moadei Yahweh, and then comes the Shabbat. So if you're not versed in the way the language of the Torah works, the way biblical Hebrew works, then you're going to think that the Shabbat is a moed. It's actually not a moed. It's a jump, an associative jump to a holiday that's like a moed, because just as a moed occurs once a year and has restrictions of work on it, so the Shabbat occurs once a week and has restrictions of work on it, but it is not a moed. And this verse here that we see proves it. Okay, this is Milvad Shabbatot Yahweh. So here it's speaking about the sacrifices, the fire offerings that you bring on the Moedim, and this is in addition to or aside from those that you bring on the Shabbat. Milvad Matnotechem, and aside from your offerings, your voluntary offerings, your gifts. Okay. So we saw there were different types when we saw Leviticus, there are different types of gifts, like a nidava. Umidvad kol nidrechem, that's when you fulfill an oath, aside from all of your oaths. So you say, oh my God, I just got a call from my doctor. He says there's a lump, God forbid. He says, the lump on my throat. And you say, oh my God, God, please, if this turns out to be nothing, I promise I'll sacrifice 3 bulls on the altar in Jerusalem. And then you go to the doctor and it turns out to be nothing. We made a mistake. That was, we got your card mixed up with someone else, or it just turns out it's I don't know, a fishbone stuck in your throat or whatever. And then now it's time to go pay your neder. You made a neder. You said to God, you made a swear, an oath. You took something upon yourself. Said, if you get me out of this, Yahweh, I will do such and such. And now it's time to pay. So that's what nidrechem is. Milvad kol nidivotechem. Those are voluntary offerings. Asher titnu li Yahweh, which you shall give to Yahweh. So this is a summary of the Moedim, the fire offerings that are brought on the Moedim, and then in general, all of the other offerings that are brought in general to Yahweh. Okay? And then, so that's it. This is the end of the section on the Moedim. From here, from verse 4 through verse 37. Introductory sentence, the meat of the matter, and then the summary sentence. And they all follow pretty much the same pattern. They tell you that you're restricted from work. It tells you what offerings you're supposed to bring. And it doesn't really give much. It gives some information, but not that much. Okay? Now it goes back and visits Sukkoth. It gives us more information about Sukkoth, but this is actually outside of the paragraph having to do with the Moedim. This is an afterthought in a certain sense. Okay? Because it's detailed information about Sukkoth. And these explanations of the holidays they're detailed, but they're detailed in very specific ways. They're telling us what sacrifices we're supposed to bring. They're giving us a little bit of information, maybe a bit more in the case of Yom Kippurim, about what the holiday is about, but it doesn't go into great detail about what we're supposed to do on the holiday. So for instance, Yom Kippurim, we don't go into great detail about it. It tells us we're supposed to do fast, but for the great detail of exactly what's supposed to be done on Yom Kippurim, you have to go to Leviticus chapter 16, okay? And the same here. So the Torah now sticks the details, or some of the details, about what else is supposed to be done on Chag Sukkot right here. Okay? And let me try to finish this off. There's a lot to say about this, but I want to finish it off. I want to go into Leviticus 24 next time. I really do. I've been saying this for weeks, so let's just read through this. Verse 39, Ach, b'chamisha asar liyom lechodesh hashvi'i. So this Ach implies, we've seen this word Ach before. We saw the word Ach as a connector between, where is it? Here, verse 27, as a connector between between Yom Teruah, the day of shouting, the festival of trumpets, what the rabbis incorrectly call Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippurim. It joins the two together. Okay, so this Ach is kind of a joining thing. Okay, or in addition, or now we're going to go back and clarify a bit more about Sukkot. That want to come inside? Okay, sure, but just don't go crazy. Come here, baby. Come here. You can't go crazy. Okay, it's not a kiddie playground. All right. Come. No. Show. No. Come over here. Come here. Come. Stay. I know. You want to crawl over the place. I got it. You want to crawl around on my keyboard. I understand. Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? I think I'm going to throw you out again for a little while. 1 second. Let's make sure we didn't miss anything up. Okay. So, Ach b'chamisha asar yom lechodesh hashvi'i. No, I guess we're going to talk about this next week. I'm sorry to say. This is late. We've been going at this for 3 hours almost. I'm tired, and there's a lot to speak about here. So, we're going to do one more week of Leviticus 23. That's just the way it is. Okay, I'm going to summarize here. I'm going to end up here. I'm going to do what I said the Torah does. I'm going to tell you, I told you at the beginning what we're going to talk about. Then we talked about it. Now I'm going to tell you what we spoke about. So let's summarize what we learned today. Hey, excuse me. What do you think you're doing? No. I have to throw it up. I'm sorry. That's it. You're going out. Excuse me for 1 second. Show. You can't do that, sweetie. No. Out. Stay out. Okay. So we spoke about the situation of the Jews in the United States, the last major concentration of Jews in the world outside of the land of Israel. We spoke about my belief, my prediction, my quote-unquote prophecy. I want to call it that, although I don't mean it in a literal sense, that the Jews have 10 more years left in the United States, and that we can, if we subtract 100 years off the current year, we can very interestingly, and I'm not saying there's some deeper meaning in this, but it's just a interesting observation. We could see that the situation in the United States is very similar to the situation that was in Germany and in Europe 100 years ago. So if we are now in 2026, 100 years ago was 1926, Germany was having a lot of problems, a lot of the same problems that the United States was. Morally, it was decayed. It was corrupt. There were all kinds of, some of the same things. Apparently, somebody told me today that they were also pushing the idea of, trannies in Germany back in the 1920s in the Weimar Republic. I don't know if that's true or not. So you can look it up. But the country was falling apart economically, socially, spiritually, and in many other ways. The Jews were beginning to be targeted for blame, whether right or wrong, I'm not getting into that, for this decay. And this ultimately led to the rise of Hitler and the expulsion / ultimate extermination of the Jews. So we could see a similar situation happening in the United States right now. And so it's time for us to get out of that country. That's number one. We spoke about Malachi, book of Malachi, and we encountered some passages which were a bit cryptic, but I guess it seemed to be at the end of the day speaking about, it was a tirade against Judah and a tirade against not being loyal to the wife of your youth. One could even say a tirade against divorce, although I think there's a lot more going on than that. I myself will have to go over that with a bunch of different commentaries, but that's what we saw. And then we went on to Leviticus 23. We spoke about Sukkoth, when it occurs. We spoke about how it is the culmination of the 6-month agricultural year or agricultural cycle in Israel, that it's a holiday celebrating the fact that we've gained forgiveness for our indiscretions after Yom Kippurim, and also it's a festival. It's a harvest festival, as so many ancient and even modern cultures have to this day. And we spoke about how the Torah works in various ways. Onomatopoeia, meaning words that their very sounds express the feeling or the idea behind them. Associativeness, right? Hypertext. The Torah is essentially a hypertext document. HTML means hypertext markup language, and so I like to call the Torah the original. It's not the original. Many ancient documents are this way, but quote unquote the original HTML, the original Wikipedia, right? You can jump from topic to topic, and we saw how topics are related by where they might be logically associated or remembered. And we saw here that the summary sentence for all of the Moedim occurs here, but then afterwards, more information is added about Sukkoth, which we're going to discuss next week. For the 7th week, we'll be learning Leviticus chapter 23, and I hope next week will indeed be the last week. So before we go, any questions, any comments before we sum up here? If not, then I'm going to thank you all for joining me. I'm going to wish you all, Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, wherever you might be in the world. And then just some technical issues. So we now have an announcements group, a WhatsApp announcements group, where you can get informed of our studies and other activities that are available to the public. That should be in the description. Wherever you saw the description for this talk, if you scroll down, you'll see Connect with Us. And then we also have the ability now to join the World Alliance of Qara'im for a very reasonable monthly fee. And I explained my reasons for doing this in previous talks. I'm not going to go over it again, but I will post a link. So if you want to become a member of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and then you'll be part of a private World Alliance of Qara'im community. We're going to have special talks, studies, lectures just for that community. And then you could do so by visiting this link here. I'll post it. And these are the ones I wanted to separate the wheat, the wheat from the chaff. And that was one of my main reasons for doing this. I want people who are really serious about being part of the World Alliance of Qara'im to prove it. It also helps us raise a budget. We have a lot of plans for the coming year, for the next coming years. and this helps support us financially. So consider joining the World Alliance of Qara'im as a member, and you'll get many benefits. If not, then of course you can attend these weekly Shabbat studies, which will always remain free and open to the public, and maybe once in a while do some other studies. But there'll be much more, both community and talks, lectures, studies for those who prove that they are truly committed to being part of a Karaite community, the World Alliance of Qara'im community. Then you can do so by following that link. So that's all for today. We'll go out as always with some music. Let me change it up a little bit and try to find some music that it's not just going to be a repeat of what we had before. Let's see. Playlists. I haven't listened to those in a long time. Let's go through some of these. That works. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us here. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. And looking forward to seeing you again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
הילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים כהילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים ללחי מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים כהילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים כהילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים ללחי מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים הילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים. צמא נפשי לאלוקים, צמא נפשי אלוקים, אליך מתי אבוא ואראה פני האלוקים. נפשי תערוג אליך